Straight on to the business news now. Brian Quinn is here. He's starting in the US. The country's central bank is holding interest rates steady, much to the displeasure of President Donald Trump.
Indeed, Stuart, the US Federal Reserve, as expected, keeping its benchmark lending rate unchanged at its latest policy meeting on Wednesday. That rate staying at 4.25% to 4.5% as the central bank calls a pause after 3 consecutive cuts that had brought that key rate down by a full percentage point. Fed Chief Jerome Powell says the central bank is in, quote, no hurry to return to cuts, saying the U.S. labor market is solid and that while inflation appears under control, it remains above the Fed's 2% target. President Donald Trump quickly lashed out at Powell and the Fed in the wake of that rate pause. Trump has called for rate cuts as he pushes a deregulatory growth agenda. A number of his proposed policies, though, are threatening to rekindle inflation, notably his threats to impose significant tariffs on imports to the U.S. Powell noting the potential for those policies to weigh on future rate decisions as he spoke to the press Wednesday. Here he is.
In the current situation, there's probably some elevated uncertainty because of significant policy shifts in those 4 areas that I mentioned: tariffs, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulatory policy. So there's probably some additional uncertainty, but that should be passing. We should go through that, and then we'll be back to the regular amount of uncertainty.
Now, next, some unwelcome news for the French economy as the government struggles to get a budget through Parliament.
So the latest official data here in France shows the country's economy shrank in the final quarter of 2024. GDP for the year as a whole was up by 1.1%, helped along by a boost from the Paris Summer Olympics. That growth coming in no small part during the third quarter when GDP rose by around 0.4%. But the end of the year saw the economy underperforming expectations, contracting by 0.1% amid a political and fiscal crisis that has paralyzed the country's government. The failure of former Prime Minister Michel Barnier to get a budget through Parliament continuing to hang over his replacement, François Bayrou. The Macron administration is hoping to get the public deficit down to 5.4% of GDP this year, with a goal of getting back under the EU's 3% limit by the end of the decade. Negotiations on the budget are ongoing in the country's hung parliament. Here's a government spokesperson on those negotiations Wednesday.
Negotiations are ongoing at this stage. The members of the Joint Committee are in talks, and we hope that there will be no hostage-taking of any kind on the adoption of the budget for France. This is the number one issue for our country. We really must achieve a positive outcome.
What about the markets then, Brian? How are they shaping up?
So, Stuart, European indexes opened slightly higher on Thursday as investors here on the continent look ahead to a widely expected interest rate cut from the European Central Bank later in the day. Shares in Deutsche Bank under hard pressure at the open, down some 5% as the German lender announced a sharper than expected drop in fourth quarter profits. The DAX in Frankfurt just north of the flat line. Over in Asia, meanwhile, most indexes were closed Thursday for the Lunar New Year holiday. Tokyo trading, though, with the Nikkei gaining ground despite Wall Street's losing streak over recent days following the release of Chinese AI chatbot DeepSeek. Shares in Japanese tech investment giant SoftBank were down around 1% on news that the fund is set to invest up to $25 billion in U.S. artificial intelligence leader OpenAI. Plenty of developments continuing to take place there around the AI sector, especially in the wake of that DeepSeek announcement this week, Stuart.
Brian, thank you very much. Brian Quinn there with the business news here on France 24. Going to take